Hello and welcome to this quick hip and hamstring opener video. My name's Caroline and I'm here at Movement Style. Let's come onto the mat on our backs in order to begin this short sequence. Going to roll down through the spine, lengthening it out as much as possible. And even once we've arrived here, we might just lift the hips and replace the pelvis to the mat, balancing the weight out right side, left side, and then lift the ribs up and stretch the waist out of the hips and bring the ribs back to the mat, opening and broadening the ribs and the shoulders, right side, left side. And then let's support the head with the hands, lengthening from between the shoulder blades through to the crown of the head and bringing the head down in contact with the mat. To begin with, we're going to bring first one leg and then the other leg forward and towards the abdomen. Keeping the legs parallel and allowing the hands to lightly support the thighs around the knees. In this position, thinking about rolling your tailbone right back in contact with the mat and seeing if you can feel here a sense of your spine opening and lengthening. Just always adjust again if you need to the positions of the hips and the ribs and the head. Once here, we need to allow the back of the spine to soften. So all those little spinal processes, those little prongs or thorns at the back of your spine, allowing them to soften and to relax towards the tailbone, letting the spine grow heavy. And remembering as you're relaxing the spine to also include the spine in the back of the neck. Once the spine begins to soften, then relaxing and opening the muscles across the breadth of the back of the hips, across the back of the waist, the muscles softening away from the spine, relaxing and softening the muscles away from the spine in the back of the rib cage and the shoulders. And especially our exhalations are really helpful for relaxing the back muscles and the spine. Then, as you feel ready, on an inhalation, we're going to try and create lots of space, especially down into the pelvic region. And then as we breathe out, we're going to allow the hips and the thighs to open away from the midline of the body. And if you can first of all think about a little bit of width in your pelvis between the crests of the hip bones, lots of space. And then relaxing and really softening into the hip joint. And then from the hip joint, if you think about releasing right from the start of the inner thigh, might even be going upwards and outwards to begin with, keeping the pelvis wide, softening into the hip joint, that sense of lengthening from the really origins of the inner thighs out towards the knees. And only when you've created quite a lot of space there, allowing the weight of the legs to relax towards the hip joints. Checking in again with your spine, seeing if you can keep the tailbone rolled into the mat, that sense of ease through your spine and the back of the spine, including the neck, and the back muscles nice and broad and soft and open. And then still with the legs and the hips in this position, we're going to, with an inhalation, sweep the arms up and back, making an arc through the air above us. And if you can allow your arms to travel back with as little muscular effort as possible, you can probably really feel there the muscles along the sides of your rib cage opening and enabling you to free more space then through the thoracic spine, the spine in the back of the rib cage. And we just breathe here once again, checking in with the spine, letting it soften, remembering to let the back of the neck stay soft, allowing the shoulders to broaden and open against the mat beneath us, softening between the shoulder blades and the rib cage, letting our breath help us to create space in the body, over the front of the spine, right down into the region of the pelvis. And then again, on an exhalation, we'll let the thighs come parallel and the hands draw back so that they come onto the knees again. Just breathing in to prepare here. And then as you're ready, allowing the legs to extend upwards, extending through the knees. And in this movement, the aim is to still keep the spine really relaxed and soft. It could be, if you notice that your spine's already tensed up at the base of the spine, something like this has happened. And the key to this is to allow the legs and the leg muscles to stay relatively passive, to keep a little bit of tone in the lower abdomen, drawing it down and back. And bearing in mind that we need to release not just through the backs of our legs here, but through the insides of the legs, from the inside of the hip joint, through the inside of the knee to the inside of the heel. It doesn't matter about the legs getting fully straight. It's really trying to find a balance here between our spine staying relaxed and the legs opening and lengthening. So another breath or so here. And then once again, as you're ready, let's breathe out and fold the legs back in and towards us. And we're going to flow the sequence through again, a little bit more swiftly this time than the first time. It will probably go more smoothly because the body's already opened for it. So once again, anchoring the tailbone into the mat, relaxing the spine, allowing the hips and the waist and the ribs and the shoulders to soften and open, to connect in with the back of the neck, and from the inside, relaxing all the muscles of the neck and throat. And then as you're ready, breathing in to create a little bit of space. And as you're ready with the exhalation, letting your pelvis itself widen and open, and then the hip joints soften and releasing to the sides, and really from the origins of the inner thighs, allowing the legs to open away from the pelvis. And once again in this position, just check that the tailbone's staying in contact with the mat, and that your spine is able to relax, and including in the neck, and that the breath is easily able to flow in and out of the body. And already this position may feel a little softer and a little more open than the first time. And then in this position, which is essentially the supine frog, Supta Mandukasana, we're going to breathe in and let the arms travel back lightly and gently, so that we can feel the space is opening up between the ribs, stretching the sides of the rib cage. Let the spine release and lengthen right the way through to the crown of the head, and then the arms relaxing on the floor or the mat behind us, softening again between the shoulder blades and the rib cage. Checking in with your spine. Are you able to relax your spine here? Are you able again to soften through all the little spinal processes on the back of the spine, including in the back of the neck? Really breathing, and there's often lots of space for the breath here over the front of the spine. And on the exhalations, relaxing the breadth of the trunk of the body and the hips into the mat. So once again, as you're ready, on an exhalation, letting the arms flow back and the legs flow into the parallel position again, settling the spine, breathing in to create space once more, especially down into the pelvis, and breathing out to allow your spine to stay relaxed as you release the legs upwards. So now often when we're trying to lengthen the spine, the power of the legs takes over the action. And really when we want to be quite open in the hamstrings and the lower body, the spine also needs to be able to release with the legs at the same time to get the maximum space and openness in our bodies. So just keep checking in with your spine here. Allow the active lengthening and opening of the spine between the tailbone and the crown, allowing the sense of ease around the spine to be as much a part of the heart of this posture as your legs moving upwards. So we just breathe here. Maybe a last breath if we feel all right. Keep that release through the inside leg, engagement in the lower abdomen. And then once again, as you're ready, on an exhalation, just folding the legs in and down. Let's just circle the hips there a little bit on the mat and releasing, circling a little bit in the opposite direction and releasing. We'll let both feet come back towards the floor again. We can roll onto one side and roll up through our spine. Let's come into the second phase of this legs and hip opening short sequence. And that's going to involve finding the Mandukasana, the downward facing dog. And then from the downward dog, we're going to come down and into the prone frog, Mandukasana. So once again, just thinking about this lots of space and length through the spine. So in the all fours, allowing the tailbone to actively reach backwards, opening up the space between the sitting bones and the shoulders so the spine stretches in between, letting the arms be relaxed, not stretching too far so that you're overstretching and you can't keep lengthening. Finding lots of space again now between the fingertips and the sitting bones so you feel the sides of your ribcage opening. Sometimes the arms and hands just need to relax back a little bit so the shoulder joints can keep opening. If you keep adjusting that, then you'll eventually find that space that you need through the shoulder joints. So reaching right back, space between the tailbone and the crown. Then, as you're ready, on an inhalation, pulling forwards towards the all fours, just checking that you'll have your toes and your hands on your mat the same. So nice deep lift in the lower abdominal muscles. Spread and open your hands so that all 5 digits are nicely separated away from each other, and lots of weight going into the index finger, the pads of the index fingers and the pads of the thumbs. And we're going to hover away, deep lift in the lower abdomen to hover, to press back. Once again, finding that space between the fingertips and the sitting bones. Let the stretch work up through the sides of your ribcage, sides of your waist to your hips. Deep lift in the lower abdomen, navel pulling to the spine. Shoulder blades wide and moving up the back. And the outsides of your arms really work and lift. And the insides of your arms are lengthened down from the inside of the shoulder joint back into the index finger and the thumb. So now from here, as you've really stretched back and sent the weight of your hips away from your arms, you can just sink your heels downwards. Try to keep your lower abdomen lifted, letting go in the inside of the hip joint, inside of the knee, right through to your heel as well. Little light drawing up through the kneecap and the front of the thigh. Breathing here. So now the knees don't have to extend, but again they may, especially if you keep the work of the legs balanced with the work of the trunk for lengthening the way we practiced lying on the back a moment ago. So the breath can dive back into the depth of your ribcage, right back into the solar plexus. On the exhalation, nice deep lift in the lower abdomen, navel pulls to the spine, and the spine lengthening forwards and downwards through its own weight into the crown of the head. And the last breath here. And as you're ready, coming through on your next exhalation, we're going to release the body back down and into the all fours position. Now, seeing as if you come down, if you can keep the weight of the pelvis still very supported and lifted with your lower abdominal strength, because we're going to now separate the thighs away from the center of the body again. And if you're holding on to the pelvis between the thigh bone and the pelvis gripping there, it's really difficult. In other words, if you're using the hip flexors, but if you can try to float your pelvis away from your thigh bones using your lower abdominal core strength, it's a lot easier for the legs to begin to separate. So taking it easy here, of course, we're weight bearing now through the hip joints, and it's much tougher than in the last position lying on the back. And as well, keeping the crests of the hip bones nice and open, so before too much weight sinks down, widen the pelvis, soften and relax into the hip joints before too much weight sinks down. and thinking about opening the inner thighs from the start, the origin of the inner thigh. So just let it come through to something that feels reasonable for you. And once again, we're moving as we can, the hip bones back, directly stretching the tailbone back and behind us. So again, you need quite a lot of deep abdominal strength to be able to do that. Keeping the crests of the hip bones wide. And again, if the arms stay soft at this point, elbows a little bit bent, it will help us to put space through the waist, on into the rib cage, and from here, the head and face might go through to the mat and the arms might extend all the way. And sometimes people can get very far in this posture, but their nose is in the way. There's not much we can do about that, anatomically. So usually if that happens to me, I just let the elbows bend out to the sides a little bit. Once I've come into my fully extended position, and that tends to help me to accommodate my nose. If you're finding that the weight on the hip joints is just too much to be able to stay here, put a little bit of support in. So possibly a brick like that, and you can then support the head there. Or you might work with, a lower brick. Then you can still be longer, and the advantage of that is as well that there's room for your nose. When you've taken a little bit of weight off the hip joints by supporting the trunk of the body, that may actually enable you to find some more space there in your hip joints. Just making sure that you're not forcing here. There's quite a lot of weight going through the structure of the hip joint, and it should be comfortable. And we can always come back to the practice, and we can always take time to find a more open position. And ultimately, that will be better for us. So let's just spend a few moments here breathing. So we may be able to, as we breathe in, feel the coolness of the breath meet the skin at the back of our throat. And then following the breath and the vibration of the breath in the mind's eye, right along the front of your spine, all the way to the tailbone. And then with the exhalation, allowing the sitting bones to sink towards the heels a little bit, relaxing the spinal processes on the back of the spine, and seeing if it's possible to release your head just a little bit further away from your tailbone. Just breathing through a last 3 slow full rounds of the breath. Nice deep full breaths reaching back along the front of our spines, and breathing out to relax the distance between the hips and the crown of the head as we soften and open the spine. And then, as you're ready again, with an inhalation and keeping the abdominal muscles nice and lifted, let's gently walk back with the hands. And for a moment, you sort of pass through the seated frog. And we'll let the legs come in towards each other again there. And just allowing the body to come all the way through onto the back. Just rolling down again, allowing the legs to extend. Just letting the legs roll inwards and outwards a couple of times at the hip joints, and the arms the same, shimmying the hips and shimmying the shoulders, and spending just a few moments here with the body completely released and open, the knees open, the hips relaxed, the spine relaxed, just allowing the earth to absorb the weight of the body and allowing the body to absorb the effects of the practice we've just done. Spending a moment or two to connect with the quality of your breath here, the energy of the breath. Spending a moment or two to connect with the energy all throughout that length and breadth and depth of space that is the body. Being aware of any sense of positivity that there may be in the energy of the body. Any sense of unity or harmony that there may be through the body, through the mind, through the whole being. And Then again, gently allowing your breath to adjust back to something more suited to movement and activity, and we're bringing movement back into the fingers and the hands and the toes and the feet. Reaching a good stretch up and a good stretch down through your body, letting your muscles engage again about your spine, all through your back, into your arms, into your legs. Checking that your senses are moving outwards again and engaging with the physical world, sense of sight moving outwards and hearing moving out into the wider distance again. We can hug the legs in towards us and circle the hips on the mat. Just checking in with the boundaries of the physical body, the skin, where it meets your clothes and the air around you, so you just know where the body begins and ends again as we move back into everyday life and everyday activity. We can roll back up towards standing, or seated rather, and just a last breath here. Om Shanti Namaste. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this little sequence and that you find it helpful for opening the hips and the hamstrings and for lengthening the spine, and also for opening and energizing the breath. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please think about doing so, and it always helps you to know when I'm uploading a new video. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon on Movement Style.